nervous and you start calling them. You go into chase mode and you call and text and email and they never get back to you. Or they might say things like this: well, how much is this software? After you start talking to them about all the cool things, it's, well, how much is it going to cost? And then you tell them, and then what do? Well, I'm not sure we have the budget for this right now. Sounds really good, but I tell you what, maybe call me back in 6 months. We might be able to afford this then. What the hell? And then you call back in 6 months, and you either learn they purchased something from one of your competitors, or you keep getting their voicemail and they never get back to you. Has that ever happened to you? Okay, let's just stop the madness. You see, the mindset of a top 1% earning salesperson who's using EPQ is not to convince and persuade your prospect by telling them how wonderful you are, your company is, your pricing is so cheap, and how your product is. That's what average salespeople do. Instead, it's time to find out what they're looking for and why they're looking for it, like what's behind it, okay? Detaching ourselves from the expectations of closing that person and instead investigating whether or not they have problems that we can actually solve. See the difference in that? Now, let's see how using a connective question in that same scenario can start the sales process when calling outbound leads. Let's say in the same scenario, a prospect responds to an ad. They leave their name, their email, and phone number. They know someone's calling them back, but they don't know who or when or where that's going to happen. Okay. Now this time, let's say that you call for an insurance company. You sell life insurance. Okay. Hey, is John there? Oh, hey, John. Yeah, it's just Jeremy Miner. It looks like you had responded to one of our ads and asked us to call you about possible financial protection for the home and family when something does happen to you, right? Okay, let's do that again. I want you to listen to my tone. Hey, is John there? Oh, yeah, John, it's just Jeremy Miller calling you back. It looks like you'd responded to an ad and asked us to call you about looking at possible financial protection for like your home, your family when something does happen to you, right? Now, what did I immediately do there? I'm automatically getting them thinking results-based thinking, looking at possible financial protection for the home and family when something does happen to you, right? See, I'm not focused on cost or price or anything like that or my solution. I'm focused on the end result, which is financial protection for their family when something does happen. That's the first connective question. Oh, yeah, I saw that. Now, hey, I was curious because I do have some questions for you, but I was curious when you went through the letter that you got in the mail, what was it that you saw on that really, because we send out a lot of letters, what was it that you read there that really, I guess, attracted your attention? Now, let me do it another way. Let's say they responded to an ad. See how you read languages. Now, hey, I was just curious because I do have a couple questions for you, but when you went through the ad where you saw X and Y and Z, what was it about the ad that, I guess, attracted your attention? Now, why am I asking that? Because not only did they tell you why they responded and what attracted their attention, but more importantly, who are they telling? They're telling themselves why they were interested. It's a reminder, okay? That is the first step towards them persuading themselves to fully listen to you and your solution, what you're offering. Now, the second reason is you start to see a bigger picture of why they responded and what they're looking for. You're starting to see more of a picture there. You're not seeing a ton yet, but you're starting to get there. Okay, now remember, we're going to go into that third connective question. Remember, it's called a status frame. Remember we talked about that earlier? All right, well, I would say the first part of this call, I mean, it's pretty basic. It's really more for us to find out, what you might be eligible for, kind of what you have in place now when something does happen to you compared to what you guys might be looking for as far as, more coverage, just to see what that gap looks like, to see if we can help. And then, towards the end of the call, if you feel that it might be what you're looking for, we can discuss possible next steps. Would that help you guys? Or here's another way to do it. I'll show you another example. Or you can say, are you with me on that? You can say, would that help you? Or does that help you? Or are you with me? Just different ways to relanguage that, okay? Now, let's break down what we just did in that third connective question. Remember, this is called an NEPQ status frame. We need to make sure the prospect understands there could be next steps at the conclusion of this meeting or call. Now, if you sell B2C, business to consumer, and you're in a one-call close, the next step would be going through your presentation and then committing them to purchase what you're offering on that first call. Now, if you sell B2C and you do a two-step close, like sending them to a webinar or maybe drafting a proposal for them, that would be the next step to schedule that next appointment to go over that proposal with them. Now, if you sell B2B, more of a complex sell environment, that requires multiple calls, meetings, and touches, then you're just scheduling the next step after that first discovery call or after that first interaction. You're just moving them micro commitments that lead to the ultimate commitment of purchasing. Could be a meeting with your department head, other decision makers. It could be a demo if you sold SaaS or some type of software. It could be a proposal with more decision makers in the company. It just depends on what your next step is in your sales process. Now, we also have to do this in a way where they let their guard down, where they don't think at the end of the call, we're just going to try and hard close them like they've been used to from all these other salespeople. And some trainers will say that you need to set the agenda like this. And like I said, there are different versions of this. I kind of went over a little bit of this a while ago, but I just want to remind you. Some trainers will teach you this. Now, at the end of the call, if you feel it's a good fit for you and we feel you're a good fit for our company, we're going to show you the next steps. Is that fair enough? Okay, and all that does is causes most of your prospects to emotionally shut down, unless they're like a lay down sale. Okay, because they know at the very end, obviously, if they give you their credit card, that you're not going to say, no, you're not a good fit for our company. So that type of stuff just causes them not to trust you because they don't really believe it's real. They think it's BS, just so you know. Just like you would think it was BS if somebody told that to you, okay? So we don't want to trigger them to throw up resistance, all right? We want to get them to let their guard down and keep that guard down the entire sales process from start to finish. Now, why would I also say the first part of this call is pretty basic, okay? And I went over this briefly a while ago. Why would I downplay the call? Because we want them to feel relaxed. We want them to feel comfortable. They can trust us. They can open up to us. They can go below the surface, tell us what's really going on. So when you downplay the call using more neutral languaging, it causes your prospects to keep their guard down, okay? Now, why would I also say this? So we can see what the gap looks like. Did you see my hand? So we can see what the gap looks like. Notice how my hands did that? It automatically did what? Visually in their mind if they could see me virtually, maybe through Zoom or in person. It causes them to start looking at the gap. Now, even if I'm on a call and they can't see me, you still want to use your hands and body language because that affects your what? It affects your voice fluctuation. It affects how your tone comes across. Now, if they can see you, it's even better. They start to visualize that gap in their mind from where they are compared to where they want to be. Does that make sense? All right. Now, at the end of that, why would I say if you feel it might be what you're looking for, we can talk about possible next steps. Once again, remember we want to use neutral languaging. We don't want to use assumptive languaging here because 30 seconds to 1 minute into a call, how much trust and credibility do you have? Not much, all right? That's only built by our questioning ability throughout that conversation and or sales process. All right, let's look at the fourth connective question. Okay, what were you hoping to get out of the meeting with us today, just so I have a better understanding? Or if it's a call, what were you hoping to get out of a call with us, just so I have a better understanding, or just so I have a better background, or just so I have more context? So in this example, let's just stay in the life insurance space just to show you an industry-specific example. You used to agree, oh, yeah, we'll go through all the different options for sure. I mean, it all depends on your age, your health conditions, how much your mortgage and other expenses are, who your favorite football team is, you know what I mean? And kind of once we understand all those details that the carriers will have us ask you, at that point, I can show you all the different options to see if it would help you. Would that help you more if I did that? Now, just as a recap, when you ask that last connective question, what were you hoping to get out of the calls today, just so I have a better understanding? And if they come back and said, well, I'm just seeing how much it's going to cost and blah, 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 blah. Remember, you're going to agree with them and tell them you'll go over all the options with them. It just depends on a few things like X and Y and Z. And once you understand that, then you can know what pricing would actually even help them, okay? Remember, you cannot just ignore it and try to sweep it under the rug, okay? But you also can't just give them the pricing up front without first establishing what their real situation is and what the gap looks like, all these problems, and where they want to be. Otherwise, you're going to lose 99% of those sales, okay? Then after that, you're going to jump right in to your first situation questions depending on what you sell. Tell me, what type of life insurance policies do you have now? Or can I ask what type of coverage you have now for the family? If you sold life insurance, that would be an example of the first situation question, okay? We first have to learn what their present situation is by asking situation questions, what problems they're having, problem awareness questions, okay? The root cause and how they're being affected by those problems. That has to be done before we offer our solution and our prices, all right? The prospect has all the answers. You simply need to ask the right questions and give them time to answer. Now let's have a look on how to call a prospect who has requested information. Maybe they've called in, or maybe they've left their information on a website. Sometimes that happens as well, okay? So how do you call a prospect who's been sent information about a company or obtained information from the company's website? Now, most salespeople would make this call assuming that the prospect intends to make a purchase. They're so interested just because they simply requested some information, all right? But you know better than that. You're going to remain calm, collective, and neutral to find out if you can help the person. It might look like something like this. Hey, is Mary there? Yeah, Mary, it's just John Smith with XYZ Company. You had asked us to send you some details regarding our digital marketing strategies for small business owners. And I just had a few minutes before my next appointment to get to you to see if we could help. Is this an appropriate time? Or you could say, did I get you at a bad time? Most prospects are going to say, is this an appropriate time? They're going to say, yeah, it's fine. I've got a few minutes. Now, why did they do that? I'm going to show you that in a second. Then you're going to ask this question. I should probably start by asking you, have you found what you're looking for, or are you still looking for? And then you're going to repeat back the end result. Now, in this example, remember, you're selling marketing strategies to help smaller companies get better leads so they can scale the business. So here's what it would look like. Once again, plug in what you sell to this framework. I should probably start by asking you, have you found what you're looking for, or are you still looking for ways to get a higher quality lead to your salespeople? Remember, you're not selling the thing, you're selling the results of what that thing does. Okay, that's your first connective question in that opening. That opens the conversation. You're asking here to make sure they haven't already found something else, signed a contract, and then you can't even do business with them because of that. Now, 99% of the time, since they just responded to an ad, unless it's been a week or two, they're probably going to say, yeah, I'm still looking, okay? And then you're going to say, okay, now I was just curious, like when you went through the ad where you saw X and Y and Z, I guess what was it about the ad that attracted your attention? Did you notice my tone was more of a curious tone right there? Okay, now I was just curious, like when you went through the ad where you saw X and Y and Z, what was it about the ad that attracted your attention? See, my tone's curious. That's your second connective question. Remember, that reminds them on why they responded to the ad. It recalls that in their brain, okay? Not only are they telling you, but more importantly, they're telling who? Themselves. That's the first part of them persuading themselves. We talked about that earlier. Let's say the prospect says this. Well, I guess I was just curious about what you guys do. We have a company now that helps us with that kind of stuff, but I think I was just more curious than anything else. You would say, yeah, that's not a problem. I can go through all the details for sure. Yeah, that's not a problem. That's a simple way to diffuse that objection of already having a company. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah, that's not a problem. Okay? Yeah, that's not a problem. And really the first part of this call, it's pretty basic. It's really more for us to find out, kind of what you're doing for leads now, and then maybe what type of results you're getting from those compared to where you're wanting it to be, just so we can see what the gap looks like to see if we can help. And then, towards the end of the call, if you feel that it might be what you're looking for, we can talk about possible next steps. Would that help you guys? Let's say the prospect says this. Yeah, for sure. That works for us. Okay, and can I ask, what were you, just so I have more context, what were you hoping to get out of the call with us today as well? Well, you let them answer, okay? And then you're going to, oh yeah, we'll cover all that for sure. Now, can you maybe walk me through, what do you guys do to generate new leads and clients now? That would be an example of your first situation question, if that's what you sold. Okay, see how that framework works, all right? You're going to ask a few situation questions to help the prospect find out what their real situation is, not just for you, but also for them. Let's say they say this, well, we actually do some PPC, we do a lot on YouTube, we do some Facebook ads. Oh, okay, and how long have you been doing that type of marketing for? That would be my next situation question. Now you're in two-way conversation with that prospect, involving them in the process. You're not the dreaded salesperson who's just trying to pitch them something. All right? We've looked at some examples and discussed why it's so important to create that two-way conversation. Before we finish this training, let's go ahead and summarize the steps to take when calling your leads. Number 1, state who you are. Number 2, where you're from. It depends on your industry, and I'll get into that later on. Number 3, reference the ad they responded to and remind them that they asked you to call them. And number 4, ask them what attracted their attention. Step 5, set the frame, the status frame. 6, find out what their present situation is. and how you can help by using connective, and then we started to introduce situation questions. All right, we're good for now on this subject. Let's move on to the next training. All right, we're back. Now we're going to discuss how to tweak your connective questions if you have prospects who book on your calendar. These, in our mind, are considered more of an inbound lead. They've booked on your calendar. Now, you could be calling them on the phone. They could be on Zoom with you. You could be in their home. You could be in their business, depending on if you sell B2B or B2C. It's somewhat similar to outbound leads. Prospects have responded to an ad. You're calling back, but there's some important tweaks that you will need to understand. Now, remember, it's the same structure, all right? Let's see how you would use a connective question to start the sales process when a lead books on the calendar. They have a scheduled time, they know your name and what company you are with. Now, in this example, let's say that you sold HVAC and you are meeting them at their home. Here's how that might look like, okay? Let's say you get into the home, you open up your iPad, whatever you have. Okay, so it looks like you had talked to our technician, Ryan, the other day about looking at possibly, upgrading your system to save money because of he had mentioned you've got some rate hikes with your utility bills, right? Now, this is an industry-specific example I just gave you for HVAC. So you're just plugging in the end result for that space. It could be saving money on their utility bills. Maybe they've experienced recent rate hikes. It could be fixing the airflow in the home. Maybe there's some rooms that are colder compared to other rooms in the house. They could have a newborn upstairs and it's colder up there compared to where the primary bedroom is, where the parents live. You just never know that situation. So all you're doing is you're just plugging in what their actual real problems are. Let's say after you've done that, the prospect says, yeah, we've noticed they've gone up last year for sure. You might say something like this. Yeah, a lot of people are saying that. Now, hey, I was curious though, when you talked with Ryan, what was it that you guys spoke about that I guess had you ask us to come out just so I understand better? See what I just did there? See how we adjusted this from the outbound examples I gave you, where those leads responded to an ad and you were asking them what was it about the ad that attracted your attention. Okay, see, I'm just tweaking that a little bit. You just make these small tweaks to your structure to get the same result. Prospect might say something like this. Well, he was saying that our system, blah, 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 blah. And you might respond this way. Okay, that makes more sense. I would say the purpose of us coming over, pretty basic. It's really more for us to find out, what type of system you have now, maybe what the airflow in the home and the utilities, look like compared to where you're trying to get the bill down to, just so we can see what the gap looks like to see if we can help. And then, towards kind of once I understand all that, if you feel that, that it might be what you're looking for, we can talk about possible next steps. Are you with me on that? Or does that help you? See what I just did there? Now, let's break down what we just did in that third connective question. This is actually called, we talked about this before, okay? This is called an NEPQ status frame, okay? We've given you different examples, gave you some generic examples. Earlier in the training, we gave you some different industry-specific examples. When I went over like outbound lead training earlier on. So the same thing with inbound. We're still doing an NEPQ status frame as well for the inbound lead. We need to make sure that the prospect understands that there could be next steps at the conclusion of this call or meeting. Now, if you sell B2C, business to consumer, and you're in a one-call close, the next step would be what? For them to purchase what you're offering. Okay, if you sell B2C and you have a two-step close, like sending them to a webinar or drafting a proposal for them, that would be the next step. So the next step would be to schedule that next appointment to go over that with them, depending on what you do. Now, if you're in B2B, business to business, and it's more of a complex sound environment that requires multiple calls, meetings, touches, then you're just scheduling the next step after that first discovery call or meeting, okay? Could be a meeting with their department head or other decision makers. Could be a demo, like if you sold SaaS or some type of software. Could be a proposal with more decision makers in the companies. It just depends on where you're at in your sales process. Whatever it is, they know there's a next step. That's how you keep control of your sales process, where the prospect understands that there is next steps. Now, we also have to do this in a way where they let their guard down, okay, where they don't think at the end of the call, we're just going to try and hard close them. Now, some trainers will say that you need to set the agenda like this, and there are a few different versions of this out there, but I'm just going to give you an example, something like this. Okay, John, and at the end of the call, if it's a fit for you and you're a good fit for our company, you can say, yes, this is what I want, or no, this is not for me. No, I want to think it over, or I've got a very busy schedule, just a simple yes or no. Is that fair? Now, the problem with this approach is that many of your prospects, unless they're a laydown, which is not many of your prospects you talk to, as you know, will trigger them to what? Emotionally shut down. And when you ask even really good questions, they just stay guarded. They stay surface level. They don't open up because they feel the purpose of your questions is to trap them into saying yes at the end. And you don't want your prospect to be in that spot because you're going to lose a ton of deals that you could be making. So we want to cause them to let their guard down and to keep it guard down. All right? Now, let's do this. Let's break down that entire frame from start to finish on why I did certain things, okay? Why would I say the first part of this call is pretty basic? Now, we went over this previously. I'm just going to remind you. Why would I downplay the call? Because remember, we want them to feel relaxed. We want them to feel comfortable, like they can trust us, they can open up to us and tell us what's really going on. So when you downplay the call using neutral languaging, it causes your prospects to keep their guard down even more. That's where you want them to be. Now, why would I say so we can see what the gap looks like? Now, did you notice how I used my hands when I did that to see what the gap looks like, okay? Even if you're on a phone call and they can't see you, you still want to use your hands because that affects your tone, okay? You still want to use that body language. It affects your tonality greatly. Now, if they can see you, it's even better because it starts to get them to visualize from the start that there's a what? That there's a gap from where they are compared to where they want to be. You're already getting them to visualize that gap, okay? Now, at the end, why would I say if you feel that it might be, we can talk about possible next steps, okay? Remember, we talked about using the neutral words there, possible and might be, okay? We have to use neutral languaging. We cannot just use assumptive languaging here because 30 seconds into the meeting or a minute and a half into the meeting or the call, how much trust and credibility do we have with that prospect? Probably very little, right? We're new, they don't know us, okay? We have to build that throughout the conversation with our questioning ability and our tonality. All right, now let's talk about the fourth connective question, okay? It might sound something like this. Okay, what were you hoping to get out of the meeting with us today, just so I have a better understanding? And did you notice I slowed down my tone, okay? Now, let's say if they say something like this. If they're like, yeah, I just want to know how it worked for me, what it would cost, like get a quote, blah, 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 blah. You can't ignore that and sweep it underneath the rug. Remember, we talked about that earlier, okay? You've got to address it. You can't give them the price right there because you haven't built a gap yet, okay? Now, let's stick to that same example using the HVAC industry, okay? Remember the frame. Just plug in what you sell to the same frame. I want you to see how this works in different industries, okay? You just agree like, oh, yeah, John, we'll go through all the different options for sure. It really all depends on, what type of system you have now. I would say how the air's flowing kind of from room to room and really what your utility bills with all the rate hikes look like. And once we understand all those details, we can go over the different options and see if what we can do would actually help. Okay? Would that help you, or are you with me on that? Something like that at the end. You always want to end that with a question. You don't want to end on a statement. Now, this builds your status when you ask them, what are you hoping to get out of the call with us today, just so I have a better understanding? Now, you got to say that a little bit slow. Let me give you the right tone here. What are you hoping to get out of the call with us today, just so I have a better understanding? You don't want to say that fast. If you say it fast like this, what are you hoping to get out of the call with us today, just so I have a better understanding? You're going to get more of a knee-jerk response. But if you slow down, it causes the prospect to think deeper about the question you're asking. Now, if they come back and they say, well, we'd want to know their pricing, you just, like I said, you agree with them and tell them that you'll go over all the options with them. It just depends on a few things. And once you understand that, you'll know what the pricing would actually be for them. Okay, that's just generic there, right? You're not going to say those words. I'm just giving you an overview, all right? Like I mentioned, you cannot just ignore what they asked or try to sweep it underneath the rug. And you also can't just give them the pricing without first, remember what we mentioned, building a large gap in their mind from where they are compared to where they want to be. Then you can proceed with what we call situation questions depending on what you sell. We're going to get into that next. You can say something like this. And can you walk me through, I guess, what type of system you have now? Is it like natural gas, electric, propane, fuel oil? Like, what do you have? See, that would be an example for that industry, okay? Let me repeat that again. I want you to hear the tonality. And can you maybe walk me through what type of system you have now? Is it like natural gas, electric, propane, fuel oil? What do you actually have in place? Now, the reason why I typically would do that for that industry is most of your prospects probably don't know, right? So you kind of have to feed them a little bit about different options it could be. Most industries, they should know, but that industry, typically you got to feed them a little bit, okay? All right, now let me give you a few other industry-specific examples so you can see how the structure works and then fill in the blanks for what you sell, your industry. Now, in this example, let's say you sell weight loss or fitness training programs, all right? You help people get in shape and lose weight. And remember, you're not really selling weight loss. You're selling them the results of what the weight loss does, which is to live longer and to have a healthier life, all right? Now, let's say they book on your calendar. This is an inbound lead, and you have a meeting with them virtually on Zoom for a discovery call. Notice the little tweaks here, okay? So let's say you look down, like as you get on, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you, blah, 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 blah. Can you see me? Something like that. And then you go right into it. You look down at your notes and you say, okay, so it looks like you had booked on the calendar about looking at possible outside help to lose weight and to gain more muscle, right? Now, if they filled out some form where it asks them what they're looking for and they put in to gain more muscle or to lose weight, you just put that in there. Remember, we're already getting them into results-based thinking. Outside help in losing weight and gaining more muscle. That's what you're selling, right? Prospect says, oh, yeah, for sure. Then you hear this might come out of your mouth right here. Now, hey, I was curious. So, like when you went through the ad yesterday where you saw XYZ, what was it that they were, I don't know, maybe talking about that attracted your attention? All right, I'm going to do that again because I want you to watch my body language. I want you to hear my tone, how you're going to slow down here. Now, watch how I'm like thinking, okay, about what I'm going to say. Now, I already know what I'm going to say here, but you want the prospect to watch you think about what you're going to ask. Now, hey, I was curious. So, like when you went through the ad yesterday, where you saw X and Y and Z, what was it about the ad that maybe, I don't know, like attracted your attention? Did you see how I already knew what I was going to ask, but I want the prospect to feel like I'm thinking about the question. I'm not just some scripted, rehearsed robot. See the difference in that? Prospect might say, well, the summer's coming up and I just want to look really good in my bikini or something like that, okay? Ah, I see. Oh, okay, and I would say the first part of this call, it's pretty basic. It's really more for us to find out, what you're doing, kind of to lose the weight and what results you might have been getting compared to where you really want to be, to see what the gap looks like, to see if we can help. And then, Mary, I would say towards the end of the call, if you feel that, it might be what you're looking for and you want to lose the weight, we can talk about possible next steps. Would that help you? Prospect says, yeah, that makes sense. And what were you hoping to get out of the call with us today, just so I have a better understanding? See how the framework is all very similar. We're just tweaking it with different words for the different industries in that example. See how we're doing that? You can see the frame, you're just plugging it in. Okay, now let me give you another example. Let's say this is an inbound lead and you sell data services to medical device companies. You're selling to the medical device industry specifically. It's more of a B2B type of sale. And let's say that meeting is on Zoom. You get on there, okay, can you hear me? Can you see me? Okay, blah, blah, blah. Just little like that. You don't want to get into chit chat like, how's your day going? Remember, we talked about that earlier, why we don't want to say the same questions that most salespeople say. And then you look down, okay, so it looks like you had booked on the calendar about looking at possible outside help with getting new data so you know, I guess, all the company's market share at more of the national and even the SKU level so you can scale the business, right? Now, for that industry, that's the end result, okay? They have to get the right data so they know how to scale their business. Without the data, they're just throwing mud at the wall, hoping something sticks. That data tells them where they can scale out and what parts, all right? And then you go right into the frame. All right, and I would say the first part of the call, it's pretty basic. It's really more for us to find out kind of what you're, I guess, doing now with the data, compared to where you're wanting to use it for, to kind of see what the gap looks like, to make sure we could help. And then, towards the end of the meeting, if you feel that, hey, this might be what you're looking for, we can talk about, possible next steps and what would that look like. Would that help you guys? Okay. Oh yeah, for sure. And what were you hoping to get out of the meeting with us today, just so I have a better understanding, if I could ask? See, I lowered my tone there, okay? Then you're gonna go right into your first situation questions. Now, let's keep it in that same industry. Remember, plug in what you saw. I'm just showing you the framework. Now, John, could you possibly walk me through, what type of data you're using right now so I have a better understanding? Okay. Can you walk me through? Remember, that's an NEPQ lead-in phrase. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that further on in the training about NEPQ lead-in phrases. If you want even more advanced lead-in phrases for your questions, that's more for our NEPQ Advanced 3.0 members in that portal. You can always reach out to us about that option, that training option, all right? Now, the main thing is the same framework. We're using the same framework. You're just plugging in the end result of what happens once you solve their problems to get them thinking what? Results-based thinking over price-based or cost-based thinking from that very first connective questions out of your mouth, okay? Now, in this example, let's say that you're in the real estate wholesaling industry, okay? You're calling distressed properties for your company, trying to get the homeowners to sell to your company so they can maybe flip it or wholesale it or maybe long-term rent it out or maybe even short-term rent that property, okay? So let's say they've already talked to an inside sales agent who's qualified them, okay, on like a first call triage call, that might be called that, and now they're meeting with you and you are, let's say, the acquisition agent, the quote-unquote closer. Let's say the meeting's on Zoom because they're in a different state, okay? If they're in the same city, you might be meeting them at their house. It just depends. Same type of thing. All right, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. Can you see me? Okay, good. Okay, so it looks like you had spoken with my assistant, Tiffany, a couple of days ago about looking at ways to possibly sell your home on 555 North Hodges Drive. And she had mentioned that you were going through, it looks like, a divorce and didn't want the home to possibly go into foreclosure because, as you know, it ruined your credit, right? Now, let me do that again. I want you to pay attention to my tone and my body language. So let's do that again one more time. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, good. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it looks like you had spoken with my assistant, Carl, in the last few days about looking at ways to possibly sell your home at 555 North Hodges Drive. He had mentioned that you were going through, I guess, a divorce and didn't want the home to go into foreclosure because, as you know, it ruined your credit, right? Prospect. Oh, yeah, that's right. The divorce is horrible. I can appreciate that. I've been through one of those myself. Hey, I was curious, and Tiffany might have already asked you, but when you saw the ad the other day where they were talking about, X and Y and Z, I guess maybe what was it about the ad that, I don't know, but let's say attracted your attention? Now, notice how I already knew what I was going to ask, but did it sound like I was scripted there? No, it sounded like I was thinking about what I was going to ask. I even looked up, which typically is what people do when they're thinking about something. They kind of look up to the left or right with their eyes, okay? Prospect said, well, I like how they were talking about blah, 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 blah. You would say, okay, that makes more sense. Now, Tiffany mentioned that you were possibly interested in receiving an offer on that property. I would say the first part of this call, it's pretty basic. It's more for us to find out, more about the property you have. Let's say, kind of the condition it's in, and, really when and really why you're even possibly looking to sell, just to see if we could do something good for you. And then towards the end of the call, if you feel that, hey, this might be what you're looking for to get you out of that situation, we can talk about possible next steps. Does that help you? Notice how the frame's very similar, just a few word track tweaks there. See the difference, okay? Now, I was curious, so besides the divorce, okay, let's say if they've already given you a reason or told the rep before you a reason, you want to include that in the first part of the question. So besides the divorce, I guess what got you interested in possibly even wanting to sell the property this time? That would be a connective question for that industry. Besides the divorce, what got you possibly interested in even wanting to sell the property this time? Okay? And they start telling you why they're interested in selling the property, but more importantly, who are they telling? They're telling themselves why they're interested in selling the property. See how that works? What if they say something like this? Because maybe your tone came out kind of awkward in the beginning while you're learning advanced tonality. And they say something like, well, hey man, I don't really have much time. Can you just give me an offer and I'll tell you if I'm interested? Now, what do we first have to do anytime someone asks you the price without you even knowing what problems they have or what objectives they're trying to get to? We first have to what? We have to disarm them where they let their guard down. So you agree with them and go over what details you need to understand, which once you know that, you can then go over the different options your company would have for them. Here's how that might look like for this industry specific example. Watch how I agree. Oh, yeah, John, and I'll definitely go through all that with you, but just so you're aware, without understanding the condition and the shape of the property and those type of details, we wouldn't even know what we're even able to offer you. It'd just be us throwing out some, random number, and it might not even be a good deal for you compared to what your home is actually worth. So what I can do, if it helps, is just ask you a few questions around the property and the details of the home. And once we have more of a better understanding, then I can go back and give you a real offer that's like a real one to see if that would fit into what you're looking for. Would that help you better if we did that for you? Prospect. Oh, okay, that makes more sense. That's what's going to happen 99% of the time, because you've explained to them that if you just give them an offer, that it might not be a good offer compared to what their home is actually worth. And what do you think the prospect is going to say? Oh no, give me an offer where the home's not even worth it. Of course they're not. They're going to be like, oh yeah, that makes more sense. Now that's how I'm changing and tweaking that for that industry, okay? See, we're not trying to avoid the question and sweep it underneath the rug, as that would just do what? Trigger more sales resistance, okay? But we're also not giving them the price or an offer in this case, because as you know, if you give them that too early in the conversation, there's not been any gap built from where they are compared to where they want to be. You don't even know those details, so they don't have anything to compare that price to. Does that make sense? Because you don't have them thinking results-based thinking that early in the conversation. It would just be price-based thinking, and 90% of your sales calls would be over at that point if you don't know how to pull out the real problems, the root cause of the problem, and how the problems are actually affecting them even personally. Are you with me? Okay, let's move on. All right, rolling along quiet. All right, rolling along. All right, rolling along. All right, welcome back. In this training, we're going to talk about how to effectively ask for referrals that actually work, that they want to give you a referral, and then what to say when you call or meet with that referral. Now, the good news is, if you're following NEPQ, if you cold call, eventually, because of how I show you to do referrals, you're going to do less and less of that. If you do outbound leads or inbound leads, we're going to also show you how to get referrals. That just boosts your income. You just get more easier sales that way, okay? So let's start here with how to ask for referrals. There's a right way to do that, and then there's a wrong way to do that, okay? So we're gonna give you the framework. Here's how to start that conversation. Now, depending on what you sell would be dependent on when you ask for the referral. Let me give you an example. If you sell like a one-call close, you make the sale, you throw it over your back, you're going to ask for the referrals right then and there at their home, at their office, virtually on the phone, okay? If you sell more of a B2B complex type of sale, like a $10 million solution, you're probably not going to ask for referrals right when they buy. You might come back a month later after it's implemented. They're getting a result to come back and get the referrals. It depends on the industry you're in. I'm going to let you make that judgment yourself, okay? So here's how that might work once you're to that point. Mary, I appreciate the opportunity we've had to be able to work with you and help you guys. Can I ask you, like in your mind, how do you feel we've been able to help you the most? well, we like this and you've done a really good job, blah, 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 blah. Now, why would I ask that? Because they're going to tell themselves how you've helped them, how they feel you've helped them. And when they tell you how they feel you've helped them, they what? They own that. Then you're going to ask, so with that in mind, who do you know that might be struggling with? And then you're going to plug in the problem you solve for them. Now, with that in mind, who do you know that might be struggling with? And you plug in the problem that you solve for them, okay? An example might look like this. Let's say that you sell merchant processing. With that in mind, who do you know that might be struggling with overpaying for processing fees? See how I just plugged that in? Let me do that again. With that in mind, who do you know that might be struggling with overpaying processing fees? See how I just plugged that in? Now, once they've suggested a friend or business associate, you're going to ask for more information because you've got to get them more committed than that. Okay, now pay attention to my tone. Well, I've got, I got a friend Jim and blah, 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 or I'm thinking about Cindy. Can you tell me a little bit more about her and why you feel like we could help them? Can you tell me a little bit more about Jim and why you feel like we could help him? Now, why would you want to ask them that? Because it goes back to finding more about the person before you call. But we also want the person referring them to what? To own that. That way they're more than likely to contact that person and build you up before you make that call. See what I'm doing there? Then you're going to say, well, how do you feel it'd be best to approach them? Well, I think you should email. Let me give you his email address. Then they give you the email. You're just going to email them without them contacting? That's not smart. So you then want to ask them this question. Do you feel like you should communicate to him first that I would be calling? Would that help him more so he's not sticker shocked? That's a really good idea. I think I'm going to call him today. Why would you want to ask that question? Because we want that person referring to reach out to them before you try to call or email them. It's far more powerful. It's like I'm sending you somebody that I feel might be able to help you. You're more than likely to get a hold of them and convert that referral if they're willing to do that with you. So then you need to find out what they're going to say to them because they could say something crazy. What do you think you should say to him when you call? Now, why do you want to know what they're going to say to that person? Well, you probably want to know to prevent them from saying anything that could create resistance with that person, anything too technical or inaccurate or weird and salesy. It's like they call like, oh my gosh, you got to meet this guy. It's so awesome and it's only $25,000. That's not going to work. So you offer a suggestion to help communicate the right thing with the right words. So they might say, well, I think I'm going to tell them about this and I'm going to tell them about this and how this was so cool and you did this and all that stuff. Then you're going to say this. Yeah, that might work. Can I make a suggestion to you, though? Sure, go ahead. What if you talked about some of the challenges that you were having and that he's having right now and how we were able to solve those challenges for you guys? Would that be more helpful for him? Now, in most cases, they're going to be like, that's a really good idea. I never even thought about that. Then you're going to say this. So besides Amy, is there anyone else you feel that we could help with XYZ? So besides Amy, who else do you feel we can help with XYZ? So besides Amy, who else do you feel like we can help with XYZ? You repeat back the problem you solved for them. Now, what's important for you to notice about the statement is the use of the words, you feel we could help. First, you've made it about them and how they feel. And second, people are far more likely to give you referrals of business associates and friends if they feel you're in it to help them solve problems, all right? You don't want to say, hey, can you give me some referrals? It's at the end of the month, and if I make 2 more sales, I'm going to get a higher commission. They don't care. They only care about you helping people they know. You're going to get far more referrals if you come at it at that point than you are right now. All right, now let's talk about how to call the referrals. Like, what are you going to say when you talk to them, okay? First, we're going to look at what most salespeople would say when calling a referral. This is what most salespeople do. Hey, Mary. Yeah, Mary, hey, it's John Smith with XYZ Company. Amy asked me to give you a call and said that you would be interested in XYZ services. She said that you're wanting to take your business to the next level. Do you have 3 or 4 minutes to talk right now about how my company can get you the results you're looking for? That's if you sold like business consulting services. I just threw something in there. Now notice, who is this focused on? The salesperson, their solution, not the prospect. That was the first mistake. Now from what you've heard, what do you think the second mistake was? Well, it's this. You don't want to assume that just because you got them as a referral, they're just automatically going to be interested. That will kill a lot of referrals. I've seen tons of salespeople fail at this because when they call, they're overly enthusiastic. I don't mean be boring, but they're overly enthusiastic and they start assuming that the referral is just automatically ready to go, which triggers sales resistance. So you want to let that go. Focus on helping them find and solve problems like you did with the person that referred them to you. Remember, the top 1% earning salespeople are what? Problem finders and problem solvers. They're not product pushers. That's what average salespeople are. You don't want to be average, okay? You're not a product push anymore. You don't want to be viewed that way. You want to be taken seriously as a trusted authority, the expert. Okay, so back to that role play. Prospect says, yeah, I guess this is a good time. Here's what an average salesperson would do. Okay, great. I know you're going to be really excited about what we have to offer you today. Then they ask a couple of questions. Can you tell me 2 problems you have? And then they go right in their pitch. Okay, so let me go over what we have for you to solve those problems. We've been in business for 8 years, just to give you a background. We've helped over 500 businesses. And let me tell you a few things that we can do to help you get where you're wanting to go, because we have 2 really special promotions that end tonight at midnight. And at the end of the call, and they just keep going on. Ask a couple questions, go into their solution, and then they're just disheartened at the end when the referral doesn't buy, when they thought they were going to be really interested. You don't want to make that mistake. You don't want to trigger sales resistance. Now, another thing you always want to do is you never want to start off the call by saying something like, at the end of the call, you can make I'm going to get you the information you need and you can make an informed decision. What do you think is going on in your prospect's mind? In their mind, they obviously know that you feel the informed decision is to buy what you're selling. You're the salesperson, so it automatically triggers sales resistance. You're biased. You're the salesperson. You don't need to say words like that trigger half of the prospects you're freaking talking to. Now, it might not trigger a laydown sale, but it's just triggering all the other people that are on the fence. You don't want to do that if you want to be a top 1% earner. It just doesn't work that well. So let's take a look at what a top 1% salesperson does who uses NEPQ, okay? You're going to see a drastic difference here. Remember, never assume that just because you've gotten a referral that they're automatically interested. Your first objective is to what? Get them to lower their guard and to disarm them. Find out what problems they have. How can you help them? So here's what you're going to say when calling referrals. Hi, is this Jim? Yeah, Jim, it's just James Miller. A mutual friend of yours, Amy, had asked me to give you a call as I recently helped her with X that was causing them to X and Y and Z. And she had mentioned to me that you might be experiencing some of those same challenges. Is this an appropriate time? Now, let me go through that again with you. I want you to hear my tonality. Pay attention to my body language. I'm going to do it a little bit different. Hi, is this John? Yeah, John, it's Barry Gold. A mutual business associate of yours, Amy, had suggested that I call you as we had recently helped her with XYZ that was causing them to ABC. And she had mentioned to me that you might be experiencing some of those same challenges. Is this an appropriate time? Now, did you hear my tone? Did you see my body language? Even if you're calling, you still want to have the same type of body language because it affects your tone, okay? See, I'm very relaxed. I'm very confident. I'm not like, oh, she said you experience the same challenges. Is this a good time to talk? That's not going to work, okay? You don't want to be down here, but you want to be overexcited. You want to be right in the middle, collective, calm, assertive, relaxed, okay? Now, what do you do if the referral wants to meet you? I've seen that happen. Somebody asks me, well, Jeremy, I meet with the referrals. What do I do then? Okay, here's how to not start that conversation. Not do it. So what do you do if the person referring this person says, hey, why don't we all meet up and have coffee? Let's have breakfast or something. How do you start that conversation? A little bit different than on the phone. Maybe you sit down to say you're having coffee, you're having breakfast, and you start chit-chatting a little bit with all 3 of you. Here's how you start that conversation. Amy, it's nice meeting you, and let's maybe let's do this. Just so I don't go over things that you've already talked about with Jim. Perhaps you could give me your thoughts on what you guys have discussed and then what you'd like to cover so that we could, possibly focus on you and what you might be looking for. Would that help you? Sure, go ahead. Okay. See, that word might be looking for. I'm not assuming she's looking for anything that just causes them to not have any certain, because on the flip side, if it's an A-type personality, especially if I said, and we can talk about what you're looking for, she might say, well, I didn't say I was looking for anything. I don't really know what you guys do yet. And the resistance is up. Now you have to compete against the wall the rest of the conversation. It's so much easier if they just have their guard down the whole time, and you can help control that in that person's mind. You see the difference on how to get referrals the most effective way? All right, now here's what I want you to do. It's very, very important that you take the structure that I just gave you and start practicing it, rehearsing it over and over and over, and then actually start using it to gain massive referrals and to make way more money than you are right now. right, we're rolling along quite well today. Great work. Let's talk about how to effectively leave voicemails when you call your leads and or cold calling. I'm going to give you different examples. Now, here's my question. How do you feel about leaving voicemails when you're cold calling? Do you perceive them as a dead end and a waste of time, or an opportunity to actually connect and sell? Okay, first let's go over how to navigate through a company if you sell B2B to find your prospect, and if you cannot find them, what to say in your voicemail to get them curious enough to want to actually call you back. Can you imagine once you have that skill, if more people call you back, how much more money you'd make, how many more sales you'd make? Okay, then we're going to go over exactly what to say in a voicemail if you're just calling your outbound leads. Somebody's responded to an ad or requested information, or someone who booked an appointment but didn't answer when you called them, or didn't show up to Zoom, or didn't show up to the meeting, whether you'd meet them at their home or their business, whatever you sell. Now, let's go over first how to leave effective voicemails when cold calling and we get transferred to a prospect's voicemail. How do we get them to want to call us back? How do we get them curious enough to want to do that? Now, let's do this. Before we leave a voicemail, I'm going to show you very effective way to find the decision maker you're looking for before leaving that voicemail. Typically what we see is most salespeople leave voicemails because they want to avoid the feeling of being rejected. By not going back to the receptionist and or gatekeeper, we avoid being challenged and rejected by them. That is not good if you want to make a lot of sales. Most salespeople play the numbers game. They make a lot of calls in order to feel they've worked hard, right? But when they experience very few sales, as you know, you end up frustrated, dejected, and you don't have very much money. And that is no longer a place you have to be in. Remember, we're only focused on connecting on that call and converting that call in a cold call situation into either a sale and or a next step appointment, depending on what you sell. However, we have to keep that to ourselves. The moment the prospect picks up on you trying to close them, remember, is the moment they emotionally shut down, especially at the beginning of a cold call, for sure. So what we have to do is be more neutral, unbiased, calm, and especially detached when talking to our prospects. Now, with that mindset in place, it makes it much easier to go back to the receptionist or gatekeeper and ask for help. And let's go over a few examples on how to do that really effective. In this example, you left a voicemail to the prospect and now you're going back to the receptionist or gatekeeper. Hey, Juan, I was wondering if you could help me out for a second. Sure, yeah, how can we help you? Well, I'm trying to get a hold of Alex, who I understand is responsible for XYZ, and I just got his voicemail. Would you happen to know if he's maybe in a meeting or at lunch, or maybe he went on a trip by chance? Now notice that you're not just asking them to find Alex. You're also offering possible solutions to find Alex. Okay, there's zero sales pressure placed on that gatekeeper receptionist. It's just a normal conversation. Now, the gatekeeper is usually going to give you one of these three answers. Oh, he's in a meeting, or she's at lunch right now, or she's out of town, or on a trip, or something like that. Now, they could also say, no, I don't know where Alex is today. In this case, just reply with a very low-key statement that we've talked about before. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah, that's not a problem. Remember, that's just a relaxed statement. Takes out the sales pressure with that individual. And you can respond this way. By chance, would you maybe happen to know anyone close to his desk or office who works in his area that would know where he is or when he'd be available? Now here, you're just offering another option for that gatekeeper, okay? A lot of times they'll say yes and transfer you to someone in the office who would know where he is actually at, okay? Just helps you navigate better. Now, the receptionist could also say this. No, I don't know where he is, even if they really do know where he or she is. They might be trying to protect them from a sales call. You would then ask, would you by chance have his cell number handy? Would you by chance have a cell number handy? Now, let's say if the receptionist or gatekeeper says, no, we don't have cell numbers, or we don't give out numbers. You just say a polite way, okay, not a problem. I appreciate your time. And then maybe you just call back in a day or two and leave another voicemail if they don't return the voicemail you left, okay? Now, let me ask you this question. How do you feel about calling prospects on their cell numbers? Oh my gosh. You know, we train a lot of companies, and a lot of times salespeople think it's rude to call a prospect on their cell phone. And why is that? Well, if you still have the traditional mindset and use these outdated pushy, high pressure techniques where you're chasing the sale with the mantra of always be closing, that just means that you're focusing on yourself and your agenda is to make the sale, and you're getting rejected a ton of times. So you feel it's rude. But if you come from the place that you're only focused on them, you're focused on solving their problems, helping them find and solve problems they didn't know they had to get where they want to be, you're a problem finder and problem solver, you don't have any reason to feel anxiety about calling them on their cell phone or even calling them if they're on a vacation. I made huge amount of sales by calling even CEOs on vacation of Fortune 500 and 1,000 companies. I can assure you, if you have the right skill sets, it doesn't matter if you call them on their cell phone or not. Now, if you don't, you're going to get punched in the nose. So do you see how you can easily navigate through an entire company with NEPQ? Why? Because you're asking questions in a very calm and collective manner. You're never putting anyone on the spot or getting defensive, which will only cause them to be more resistant to you. Now, let's say you cannot locate your prospect even after navigating through that organization. At this point, it would be appropriate to leave a voicemail, especially if you call a second time and cannot get in touch with them. Don't leave a traditional voicemail with a mini sales pitch about your solution and how great your company is, because it's just going to make you appear like all these other salespeople trying to stuff your solution down their throat in their eyes. How many messages do they get every single day from salespeople that do that? You don't want to be in that category, because 95% of the time, they will never call you back and they will ignore your repeated calls, okay? Now, let me give you an example of how to leave an effective voicemail to locate a potential customer. And in this example, let's say you sold a service that helps companies reduce their expenses from their vendors. So that voicemail might sound something like this. Pay attention to my tone and my verbal pausing, how I slow the voicemail down, which causes them to become curious and to hang on to every word I'm saying. If you talk fast, they'll just view you as another salesperson, and most of the time they won't even finish the voicemail you left. I can assure you this happens all the time. Hey Alex, it's just James Miller. I was wondering if you could help me out for a moment. I'm not sure if you're the right person I should be talking to, but I'm trying to reach the person who's responsible to look at any hidden gaps to see whether any department in your company might be losing revenue due to vendors overcharging you. Now, if that's something that your company could be experiencing as far as vendors overcharging you, you're welcome to call me back. My number is 555-655. I should be available here for a little bit today if you'd like to reach me. Talk to you then. Now, remember, all I'm doing is plugging in that problem statement. We talked about that earlier. And this wording creates urgency, shows them you have other options, that you're busy. You're not just waiting all day for their phone call, okay? Now, do you feel your prospects might be interested in not losing money due to vendors overcharging them? Even if they're not losing money to vendors overcharging them, they will become curious enough, and most of them will call you back. Sound good? See where we're at? Now, let me give you another example. Let's say that you call outbound leads. Someone has responded to an ad on social media. They put in their name, email, and phone. They know someone is calling them back, but they don't know who or when. And let's say you call and they say this. Yeah, I remember filling out that form, but I'm just really too busy. Can you call me back later? Now, what would the average salesperson say to a prospect who says, can you call me back later? More than likely, they say, oh, sure. What time can I call you? And the prospect says, why don't you call me back tonight at 9 p.m. Or why don't you call me back this Friday? And let's say it's 5 days from now. And then the salesperson calls 5 days later, and surprise, surprise, what happens 95% of the time? The prospect doesn't answer. The salesperson leaves a voicemail or an email and text, and what happens? They get ghosted. Stop the madness. You don't want to be the puppet, and your prospect is the puppeteer, where they just have you do this little dance and have complete control over you. When salespeople eagerly just agree to whatever time the prospect says to call back, what happens is they reduce their status in the prospect's mind. They seem desperate. They seem like all the other salespeople out there who just are desperate to make a sale. You don't want to be in that category. Those salespeople don't do that well, especially in our day and age. Okay, you look needy, you look attached. So the prospect treats you with little to no respect. And that's why they rarely answer the phone when you call them back, and they don't call you back when you leave voicemails. So you want to establish, remember what we talked about, status frame in their mind to set up a smaller commitment for the prospect to call you back and or book a time on your calendar. And here's how that might look like. I'm going to give you a few examples. Prospect says, oh yeah, I remember filling that out, but I just don't have time right now. I'm really busy. Can you call me back later? Salesperson, yeah, that's not a problem. What I can do if it helps is give you my cell number, and you'll have to call me back a little bit later today to see if I'm going to be available for you. Would that help you? Now, you're going to watch your prospects are like, yeah, that would help, because they're used to every salesperson, what time should I call? And then call back. So they just disarm. They're like, yeah, I can do that. Okay, here's my number, 555-655. Now, what's your time frame on getting back to me today just to see if I'm going to be in the office? Or what's your time frame on getting back to me later today just to see if I'm going to be available for you? Asking them what their time frame is just to see if you're going to be available in the office is a powerful question that raises your status. It positions you as someone not needy. Therefore, you must be successful. You must help a lot of people, a lot of clients, if you don't need them. Okay, they start to view you more as the expert. It makes you appear that you are busy, okay? And they start to view you as an expert whose time is valuable rather than just another salesperson trying to sell them something. Which crowd do you want to be in? Prospect says this. Yeah, I can probably get back to you sometime later in the week, probably. So let's say you said that. What's your time frame? Like, I can get back to you later in the week. So no confirmed time. Never accept that. You want to do something like this. Remember, this is the NAPQ calendar commitment. Well, possibly. It might be harder to randomly get a hold of me like that with my schedule. What I can do, though, if you have your calendar handy, is I can pull up mine and have you book a specific time with me. That way you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. Would that help you? And watch how their guard just comes down even more. Oh, sure, that would help me. This also positions you as the authority. Time is valuable rather than just another salesperson who they can just shrug off at any time and get rid of. Now, if they don't call you back right at the time they're supposed to, which typically will happen, usually about half the time on an outbound lead. Inbound lead's a little bit different. Okay, we can talk about that later. What you want to do, let's say if they're supposed to call you back at 4 that day, you don't call back at 4 minutes and 1 second, because that makes you look what? Desperate. You just wait about 2 or 3 minutes after the time they're supposed to call you back, and then you call them back. Now, what happens if they say this? Yeah, I can call back today around 2 o'clock. If they give you a firm commitment, so when you say, what's your time frame on getting back to me later today, or what's your time, let's say it's 5 o'clock at night, what's your time frame on getting with me tomorrow just to see if I'm going to be available? And they're like, I'm going to call you tomorrow at 2, and they give you a firm commitment like that that's like a day out or the same day, you wouldn't need to use a calendar commitment. It's only if they're like, I just call you back later this week when I'm not so busy. That's when you really need to use the calendar commitment, okay? And remember, you're going to wait 2 or 3 minutes after they haven't called you, and then you're going to call them back and say something like this. Hey, Mary, it's just James Miller. I'm just a few minutes behind schedule. I just had time to get back to you. Okay, and then you're going to go right into it. See how that works? All right. Now let's go over how to leave an effective voicemail when you're calling your leads. Let's pretend for a second that you sell franchises. You sell franchise opportunities. You have ads all over the place your company does, maybe on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. And somebody responds, they leave their name, they leave their email and phone number for you to call them back. Here's how that might look. In a very relaxed tone, you would say, this would be in a voicemail. Hey, Mary, James Miller with XYZ Company. Looks like you had responded to one of our ads yesterday about possibly starting your own franchise with us so you could make more money. You would have seen our logo for XYZ Company on the site, and I just had a few minutes before my next appointment to get back to you to see if I could help. My office number, I'm going to give you my landline. It's 555-655. Should be available here for just a little bit today. If I don't answer, just leave a voicemail, and then I'll do my best to get back to you today with my schedule. Talk to you then. Okay, see how that worked? Nice and easy, nice and relaxed. Now, let's break down the voicemail. Okay, let's be specific as possible to remind them they responded to your company's ad looking for whatever you offer. Remember, I'm repeating back the end result. In that industry, so you could start your own franchise so you can What's the end result? Make more money. That's why people get into business, to make more money. Realize they probably also responded to maybe 3 or 4 or 5 other ads that same day they responded to yours, okay? They might be busy, they might get distracted, and they may have completely forgotten that they responded to your ad and asked somebody to call them back, especially if it's been more than one day. You got to keep that in mind. Keep in mind they're always being distracted, okay? They're always getting calls from other people trying to sell them something all the time. So they'll automatically have their guard up when they answer your call, even if they're really interested in what you sell. Most of the time, people will have their guard up, okay? Now reference exactly what they responded about. In this case, you sell franchises, so you're gonna reference that they responded about what? Possibly starting their own franchise so they can, remember, what's the end result? Make more money, okay? Now, why do I use that word possibly? Okay, that's a neutral word, okay, that we talk about with our prospects. Now, you don't want to say possibly, possibly, possibly over and over in a conversation, because then it's more like a technique. But the word possibly diffuses the sales pressure, causes the guard down, okay? If you called back and you said you were looking for a franchise, okay, it looks like you were looking for a franchise so you could do this and that and that. If you're too assumptive with some type of personality, especially A-types, a lot of time it will trigger them to keep their guard up, and they might say, well, we're not really sure yet, or well, I don't want you to get the wrong impression. We're just kind of we're looking around, or we're just in research mode. You can avoid that from ever happening by quite literally just using the word possibly, okay? Looks like you are possibly looking at franchise opportunities so you can make more money. Nobody's gonna say, no, I'm not possibly looking. They can't, all right? You can also use languaging like, I was just calling you back to see if we could help, or I was just calling you back to see if we could help you. Help you is a word that's focused on them and what they're looking for. Okay, it's much better than to see if this was a good fit. Too many salespeople overuse those words, okay? Now, do you see how even our voicemails are getting them into results-based thinking over price-based thinking, okay? You're here to see if you can help. You're not focused on you trying to make a sale, all right? Then you will leave your phone number to create urgency for them to call you back. You say, and I should be available here for a little bit today. Now, if you don't get me, just leave a message and I'll do my best to get back to you before the end of the day, okay? Saying that you should be available for a little bit today implies what? That you're busy. You're not just sitting by your phone or your desk waiting for this one prospect to call you back the whole day, okay? All right, let me give you another example, specific example, so you can see how the structure works, so you can plug in your industry to what you sell. Now, let's say in this example, you sell a SaaS product that helps automotive dealers appraise cars far more accurately so they can buy from the public and avoid auctions to increase their front end gross. And let's say that you're actually calling them and they answer. Yeah, is John there? Oh, yeah, hey, John, this is just Justin Smith with XYZ Company. Looks like you had recently responded to one of our ads and asked us to call you about looking at possible outside help to appraise your vehicles to increase the front end gross and kind of move your inventory faster. I just had a few minutes before my next appointment to get back to you to see if I could help. Did I get you at a bad time? Now, why would I say I just had a few minutes to get back to you before my next appointment to see if we could help, okay? If time booking wasn't set in stone, if there was no set in stone time, okay? Because when I say, did I get you at a bad time, they immediately are thinking it's only going to take a few minutes because you said I just had a few minutes before my next appointment to get back to you. Notice I'm also repeating back the what? The end result of my SaaS product is to increase your front end gross and move inventory faster. That's what you're selling. Do you see how on every single lead you call or every single voicemail you call where you leave a message, we are already getting them to think results-based thinking rather than price or cost-based thinking from the very first questions or words out of our mouth. Now, once you start to implement what I just went over with you, you're going to watch your leads become far more open to you, far more warmer to you. They're going to be nice. They respect you and what you're calling about once you switch to the new model of selling, especially with the right tone. Now, if you want more advanced tonality training, make sure you reach out to us. That is really specifically taught in our advanced NEPQ 3.0 portal and group training with me and our trainers, and also our advanced inner circle. So if you want more advanced tonality, that's all in our advanced NEPQ 3.0 and advanced inner circle training for our clients there. So just reach out to you if you want more tonality. Okay, let's do a chapter recap real quick. Remember, voicemails are not a dead end. As long as you leave an effective voicemail, it will set you apart. Remember, let your true intent of trying to help shine through, and use languaging that shows you're busy and words that create urgency and curiosity. And don't forget the neutral terms like possibly. Beautiful.